Hello, today we'll be covering the basics of Photoshop to help you get started with your soundscape project. If you need extra help while working on your project, we recommend you stop by our office hours. If our office hours don't work with your schedule, you can also request a one-on-one appointment and we will pair you up with one of our trainers. More information on either of these options can be found within our website at sts.doit.wisc.edu. When you first open Photoshop, you'll see something that looks like this. To start a new file, just go ahead and click on the blue New File button. From here, you'll be able to choose your project dimensions and settings. The first thing you'll have to do is rename your project. By default, it will be named Untitled 1. Go ahead and change that to whatever your project guidelines say. Make sure the width and height are according to your project guidelines, the orientation is correct, and also make sure that your unit of measurement is correct. By default, it will be on pixels, so make sure you change it to whatever your project says or whatever you want your project to be. For your resolution and color mode, again, follow your project guidelines. Typically, 300 is good for printing and 72 is good for digital. For color mode, RGB is good for digital and CMYK is good for printing. Everything else should be kept as is unless your project guidelines say otherwise. You do have the options for more advanced options at the bottom. We will not be touching those for now. And then after that, go ahead and hit Create. Let's go over the Photoshop interface. If you've worked with Illustrator or InDesign, this interface will feel very familiar. For this workshop, I will be using the Essentials workspace. If you want to confirm that your workspace is the same, you can click right away at the icon at the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a mini screen. If you click on it, you can select Essentials or make sure it's currently selected on Essentials. And if you want to make sure that it is the version that I'm currently using, you can reset Essentials. Reset Essentials is also a great option in case at any point while you're working on your project, you accidentally move any of these panels outside of their current spot. You can click on that workspace icon and hit Reset Essentials, and you'll bring them back to their correct position. Right away at the top of our interface, we have a small banner. This banner will change according to what tool you're currently selected on. If you're selected on the very top tool, which is the Move tool, you should see something that looks like this. If not already checked by default, I highly recommend that both Auto Select to Layer and Show Transform Controls are checked. Auto Select to Layer will ensure that whatever you click on within your project will automatically select within your Layers panel. Show Transform Controls will give you the option to resize whatever you're clicked on automatically so you don't have to manually hit the transform option. If you do prefer to have that manual option, you would select your subject, your image, and do Command T if you're using Mac or Control T if you're using Windows to resize. On the left-hand side, you will see all of your tool options. If you hover over any of these tools, you will be getting a preview and a description of what that tool does. If you want to reveal more tools, you can click and hold on any of these that have a white triangle in the corner, and you'll be able to see more options. If you prefer a two-column view of your tools panel, you can click on these little arrows at the very top of the panel, or if you prefer to go back, you can click on it once again, and it will give you just one column. On our right side, you'll see a bunch of different panels that are currently open. Of these, the ones we'll focus most on for this workshop will be Properties, Adjustments, and Layers. For Properties, this will change according to what you're selected on within your project. Because we have a blank project, this Properties panel is suggesting a bunch of things that we can do for our document itself. If you are selected on your document and nothing else, if you scroll at the bottom from Properties, this is where you can find rulers and grids as well as guides. You can change rulers, visibility, as well as grids, and you can also change the unit if that's helpful. Just click on any of these icons to reveal or hide them. This is where you can go ahead and add guides to whatever you need, and you can lock them if you don't want them to move around. You can unlock as well as hide them just with a click of a button. Next to Properties, you'll see Adjustments. These are very helpful in applying filters to our project. There are presets available now in the newer Photoshop if you want to use those, but single adjustments have always been very popular. You'll notice that some of them are grayed out, and that's just based off of your color mode. If you're in CMYK, some of these will not be available to you. Below Properties and Adjustments, you'll see our Layers panel. Currently, we only have one layer, which is the background, and it's currently locked. As we add on to our project, you'll see our Layers panel grow with more layers. Here we have an example of a project with multiple layers. If you want to hide parts of your project while you're working, you can toggle the eyeball to momentarily hide parts of your project. If you want to bring them back, just click again on the eyeball and it will come back. You're also able to lock different parts of your layers. So if you select a layer and you want to lock it so you don't accidentally move it around, you'll select it and then you'll click on this little lock icon. You'll know it's locked because a lock icon appears. Now, if you try to move this layer, it won't move. It will move whatever layer is currently underneath it. If you want to unlock a layer, just simply click once on that lock, and now you're going to be able to move it around. You can also change the order of your layers. So right now we have this background. If we wanted to move this up for whatever reason, you can just click and drag all the way to where you want it placed. You'll see a preview of it, and then you'll be able to see what your project looks like with these layers on different parts of your project. For organizational purposes, you can also rename layers by just double-clicking on its current name. The Layers panel also has additional features. For each layer, you can change its blend mode from normal to any other so that it interacts differently with different layers on your project. You can also change the opacity. You can add effects, such as this one. This is where you would add the effects. And you can also add what are called layer masks. To add a layer mask to a project, just click on this icon next to effects. The moment you add onto it, you will be able to hide or reveal different parts of that layer with your paintbrush. Finally, at the very top, we have a lot of menu options that give us additional tools and options to edit. The File menu will have where we can create new documents, open existing documents, save, as well as export. The Windows menu is very helpful to bring up panels. So in the case you don't see any panel currently and in your workspace, you can bring it up by just checking any of these to bring them up. To navigate the workspace, if you have a trackpad you're using, you can do a 2-finger swipe to pan around. If you're using a mouse or your trackpad isn't working, you can hold down your space bar. Your cursor will become a little hand, and then you can click and drag to do the same. To zoom in or out, again, if you're using a trackpad, you can just use your 2 fingers to pinch in or out. If that's not working or you're using a mouse, you can do a command plus or minus on your keyboard if you're using Mac, or a control plus or minus if you're using Windows. If you accidentally lose your spots while you're working, you zoom to out or to in or something, to easily get back to the center of your work, you can just do Command 0 or Control 0 to get back to your project. There are a few ways to bring in images into our document. If you have an image that currently lives on your computer that you want to use, you can just go ahead and click on Add from Device if you see this option appear from the bottom bar. If you don't see that Add from Device button appear, you can go to File, Place Embedded. This will make a copy of whatever file you want to use. From here, you look for your options. You resize as needed and hit Done or Enter and Return. If you need assistance saving an image to your computer, here's a quick little demo. I will be using Google Images for this example. Before I show you the process, I recommend you change your settings within your search by clicking on Tools, changing the size to large to ensure that any image that you are using for your project is of highest quality so that your final project is also high quality. Under Tools is also where you can change other settings, including usage rights in case that's something that's requested for your assignment. Once I found the image that I like, I'm going to click on it once so that it showcases on the right-hand side. I'm going to then, from here, Make sure that these dimensions are high. Usually when they're in the thousands, that's a good sign. I'm going to right click, save image as, and from here, I'm going to make sure the name is something that makes sense to me and that the location is one I want it to save to. By default, it will save to your downloads folder. Hit save. And when you open your Finder or your File Explorer, it will be at the very top of whatever folder you saved it to. Now you have the image that's ready to be opened within Photoshop. If you want to use an image that isn't currently saved on your computer, you can also just copy and paste into your project. So for instance, for this one, I could just do a copy image and then do an edit paste. One of the most popular tasks in Photoshop is removing the background. To do this, you will first need to select the image that you imported. I click on it once with my Move tool. I'll know it's selected because I'll see these boundaries around it because I have my Show Transform controls on. If I don't see this, but I want to make sure that it is selected, I can confirm within my Layers panel because that layer is currently highlighted. After I've selected my image, I'll need to select the subject within the image that I want to keep and to have everything else removed. There are several ways to select subjects within Photoshop. The method we will be using is using the Object Selection tool and maybe the Quick Selection tool. The Object Selection tool should be able to highlight your subject to give you a preview of what would be selected. If this is working for you, go ahead and click on the subject that's currently highlighted and it should match the boundaries of your subject. If your computer is having a difficult time using this tool, you can instead use the Quick Selection tool. The Quick Selection tool will let you manually select your subject. From the top bar, you'll have the option to add onto your selection or subtract from your selection. You'll also be able to change the size and hardness of your brush. You can make your brush larger and make the edges either softer or harder. Making sure again that you're on the correct layer, you can click and drag a selection and the program will try its best to select the boundaries of your object. Once you've made your selection, from your Layers panel, you can add what's called a layer mask. A layer mask will temporarily hide parts of your image that weren't selected in the first place. You'll see that from your Layers panel, you have your image, and now you have a new layer mask. Everything that's black is currently hidden, and everything that's white is currently revealed. You'll notice that our subject is a little jaggedy. We can do a couple of alterations to this. From the Properties panel, you can automatically decide to feather out your selection a little bit if that helps. But if you need to refine it even further, you can click on Selected Mask from the Properties panel. From here, you'll have much more options to change the settings. Change these to the effect that you like, and once you're happy with it, just hit OK. As I'm working on my project, if I need to edit what is revealed or what's hidden on my image, I can do so by editing the layer mask. From my Layers panel, I select on my layer that I want to edit, and I click on the mask part of the layer, not the image. Once I'm selected on the layer mask, I can use my paintbrush tool to paint on what I want hidden or revealed. To hide parts of my image, I can use the paintbrush and make sure that my color, my foreground color, is black. I can do this from either this part of my Tools panel or from the Color panel at the top. If I'm on black, I can click and drag to paint on what I want hidden. Similarly, if I change my mind and I want something revealed, I can instead change the foreground color to white, and I can add on to my mask. Reminder that you can adjust your brush sizes from the top bar. If you want a keyboard shortcut, your bracket keys found under your minus and plus keys can also change the size for you. Reminder that you do have to be on your layer mask for this to work. If you are on the image part of your layer and you use your brush, all you will be doing is accidentally painting in your image and nothing else. To undo, just do Command Z or Control Z. If you'd like to adjust the colors at all within your Photoshop project, adding an adjustment layer might be a good solution. To do this, go to the adjustment layer panel. If you don't see it on the right-hand side, you can always go to Window, click on Adjustments. And from here, I recommend you go to Single Adjustments. This way you'll be able to add each adjustment manually. You'll notice you have a lot of options. Some might be grayed out for you. This will depend on what color mode you're in. I'm currently using CMYK, so I have some adjustments that are not available to me because I'm in that color mode. Some of the most popular adjustments are brightness and contrast, levels, hue and saturation, and color balance. For this example, I will click on hue and saturation. Once I click on an adjustment, you'll notice that within the layers panel, the adjustment layer is now added. Because it's selected, within the properties panel, I will be able to add my adjustments accordingly. Although it might not be very obvious with this example, you will notice that whatever adjustment layer you add will impact any layer that is beneath it. In this case, it will impact both my subject, which is my kitten, as well as my background. If I want this adjustment layer to only impact the layer immediately below it, in this case, our kitten, then I would have to click on one icon within the properties panel. The icon you have to click is this very first one. It's a square with a little arrow pointing down that is crossed. If you click on this once, it's going to isolate that adjustment so that it only applies to the one immediately below it. So now if I were to make some adjustments, it will only impact my subject. If I wanted this adjustment layer to only impact my background, I would have to move this all the way down to be right above my background so that it only impacts that layer. After you're done setting the properties to how you'd like for an adjustment, you can continue working on your project. If you ever need to go back to edit the settings, all you have to do is click on that layer adjustment from your layers panel, go to properties, and from here you'll be able to adjust the settings again. If you'd like to see what your project will look like without an adjustment layer, you can just click on this little eyeball and it will toggle it to appear or disappear. If you want to get rid of it altogether, you can just select it from your layers panel and hit the delete button. If you'd like to add some texture or depth to your project using another image, then you should consider using blend modes. For this example, I'll be using a picture of glitter that has a black background, and I'll be making this the size of my project. By default, all layers within a project have a blend mode of normal. You can find this within the layers panel. If I click back on my most top layer, which is my falling glitter, I can click on where it says normal, and I can change the blend mode. If I hover over any of these options, I'll start seeing all of the layers that are beneath it, and you'll see how it interacts very differently for each. If I find something that I like, I can click it, and now that blend mode has been saved. If I move that layer to be, in my case, right above my background layer, it will not impact my kitten because that layer is above it. This effect can be applied to any layer. For instance, if I use for my subject, I can make it kind of blend in more with its background. It'll just alter how it looks like depending on whatever layers I have within my project. The layers panel also lets you add a few other effects. In addition to blend modes, you can also change the opacity of each layer so that it's a little bit more transparent. This is also where you can add effects. So for each layer, as long as you're selected on it, you can go to the bottom of the layers panel and click on where it says FX. From here, you can click on any of these options. They will all go to the same menu. From this pop-up box, you can change up the settings for each of these effects. Play around with these settings to get the effect that you'd like. You can also add multiple effects for one layer. So if I were to click on Color Overlay, I'll be able to add a certain hue if I want that to be for that layer. If you change your mind and want to get rid of an effect, you can just simply click on the check mark to uncheck it. If you change your mind again, you can check it again and it'll be reapplied. Once you're happy with your effects, you can hit OK, and you'll notice that from your layers panel, the layer that you selected will now have a little sublayer of effects. These you can toggle as well if you would like. Adding shapes in Photoshop is very simple. You can use the ones that are already recreated, or you can create your own using the pen tool. To use the ones that are already available, from your Tools panel, go all the way to the bottom, and you should see a rectangle. If you click and hold, you'll see more shape options for you. These are all pre-made, and you can go ahead and use them right away. To use them, just click on the one you want, click and drag, and it'll make a shape for you. Your fill color might look different from mine, but to change this, you can change it from several locations. Either you can change it from the bottom bar here, you can change it from the Properties panel, the top bar, or your Tools bar. I will go ahead and change it from my top bar. If you need more color options, you can just click on this color picker, and from here you'll be able to change it to whatever you would like. You can also change the stroke color, which is just the border of the shape. Additionally, you can change the width of that border right next to it. If none of these shapes are ones that you want, you can see what other options are available to you within the Custom Shape tool option. If you click on this, from the very top bar, you'll be able to see a section that's called Shape. Next to it, you'll see an image. If you click on this menu and expand these options, these are additional shapes that you can use in your project. So if I want to use a tree, I select it, and I just click and drag to make my shape. This currently looks like this because the outline is white. If I remove the stroke color and change it to none, I'll now have a different option. For any shape you create in your project, it will appear as a new layer within your Layers panel, and everything that you're able to do with other layers, you can apply to this one as well. You can change the blend mode if you would like. You can change the opacity, as well as add effects to it. If none of those options are still ones that you want, and you want to make a very specific shape, you can then use the pen tool. The icon looks like an old school fountain pen tip. When you click on the pen tool, you'll be able to change the fill color as well as the stroke, but also you'll be able to change this setting from a path to a shape. For the pen tool, I recommend you don't have a fill color, so click on Fill and select None. But I do recommend you have a stroke color so you can see what you're creating. You can change this later. I'm going to change my stroke width to be a little bit bigger. The pen tool in Photoshop works exactly as it would in Illustrator. To activate it, you just click once to start making your shape. Unfortunately, you do not get a preview in Photoshop as you would in Illustrator, but if you were to just continue clicking wherever you want to create your shape, you'll be able to go back to your first point, and now this is an entire shape that you can work with. You can change the fill color. Once you're on your Move tool, you can move this around. You can resize it if you need to, but now this is a shape that you can use. For the pen tool, it's helpful to know if you want to make it curved, you do just have to click and drag your line out to start making curves. If you'd like to make any adjustments to the shape you just created using the pen tool, just use the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow a couple tools down. This will let you click on individual points and move around as you need to. You can also pull on these handles if you want to make your curve a little smoother. Once you're happy, you can go to the Move tool, and now it's ready. Sometimes we find an image that we want to work with, but it's not the shape we want it for our project. So for instance, I have this texture that I have here, and I would like to change it to be a hexagon instead of a square. Something we can do to change the shape of existing images is to apply a clipping mask to it. Clipping masks also work for text. To begin, select the image you would like to take on the new shape. Next, create the shape that you want above it. In my case, I want to create a hexagon. If you're using the polygon tool and you want to adjust the number of sides, all you have to do is use your keyboard keys, the up or down arrow, to change the number. I'm going to hold down my Shift key also to keep the proportions exact. Next, what I'll do is I will go ahead and move my polygon or my shape to be below that image that I want it to take on the shape of. So from the layers panel, I just clicked and dragged my shape below my image. After that, I'm going to click on my image layer, and I'm going to right click and select Create Clipping Mask. From here, what happens is that image takes on whatever shape is immediately below it, in my case, a hexagon. Right away, you'll notice that my shape has changed its fill color to be the image, but it did keep the stroke around it. If I do want to change that, all I have to do is select my shape, and I can click on the stroke and select none so that there's no stroke attached to it. You'll notice right away, if I try to move this hexagon with my image in it, I actually just move my image within it. Similarly, if I click on my shape from the layers panel and try to increase the size or move it around, it's adjusting the shape, but my image inside doesn't adjust with it. If I want these to be linked, I'm going to have to first select both layers and click on this link option. To select two layers, click on one of the layers, hold down your Command key if you're using a Mac or your Control key if you're using a Windows, and then click on the second layer. You'll know both layers are selected because they both become a light gray. After you've selected both layers, click on this link icon at the very bottom of your layers panel, and now these will be linked. You'll have to click out to make this stick, and now if you move this around, it's linked. I can now resize it without having any issue of one area adjusting without the other. If I want these to be moved to another part of my project, I recommend you either move up some layers or you have to select both of them and move them down. Alternatively, if you're happy with how these are and you want to make sure that they are for sure merged, you can select both, right click, and select merge layers. That way, this is now one layer that you can go ahead and move around without having any issue. Doing that step though will make it so that that decision is final and you can't go back to move any part of this image within this shape. When working with text in Photoshop, you have a lot of options with how you can present it. If we go to the Tools panel and look for the T, that is the Type tool. If you hold down the Type tool, you'll find several options, but you're able to do a horizontal type as well as a vertical type. There are two main ways you can start immediately using text. The first one being just clicking once to start a title. I wouldn't recommend using this if you're using it to create a paragraph of text. Instead, I would recommend you go back to the Type tool and you click and drag a box so you can create a text box that has boundaries. You can change the font size either from this bottom bar as well as from the Properties panel as well from the top bar. You can also change the color from the bottom as well as from the Properties panel and the top. When you are using the text box feature, you will have to be selected on the text for you to be able to apply any of the settings. This is a good opportunity to remind you that any effects that we've applied to any of our images can also be applied to text. All you have to do is select the text and go ahead and click on Effects and use any of these options we mentioned earlier. Another interesting thing that you can do with text in Photoshop is you can have text take on the shape or path of your choice. So for instance, if I had my pen tool and I used it to create a shape that looked like this, and I wanted this to become my text box, I have to first make my shape, make sure I close my shape. I'll know I closed it because my little icon has a little circle next to it. And if I go to my Type tool, I can hover over it. I'll notice my icon shifts a little bit. And if I click once, it will go ahead and fill it with dummy text, and it's going to take on the shape of whatever that shape was. This shape will look most intense or most accurate if your type is smaller. You'll notice how this, because of the lines of text that are mounted here, it's much clearer to see the distinction. And what's nice about this is it uses the shape as a reference, but it doesn't convert the shape to the text box. It actually just creates a text box based off of it. So with this, you can go ahead and keep this as a background if you want, or you can just get rid of it and leave your text as is. Similarly, I can have my type live on a path. So if I use my example for my ellipse, after I've created my shape, I just want to make sure it's selected. And then I go to my type tool and then I click on any point of the circle on the edge. Then it will have text that goes right around. Now, if I want to, I can get rid of my original shape and just leave this as is. If I want to change the position of this at all, I may have to just click once on the edge of that selection to get the full box, and then I can click and drag on any corner to move this around. Another thing with type that's very helpful is if you click on your type that you're working with, you should be able to change several settings. So if you go to the properties panel, whenever you see 3 dots, that just means you have more options for editing. So in this case, you can change the spacing between lines of text. You can change the spacing between characters of text, also the scale, the vertical scale or the horizontal scale. You will also have the option to make your type all capital or small caps. And then for paragraph, you can also change up what the look of this is. If you see hyphenations, this is where you would get rid of the hyphenate if it's checked. As you're working on your project, it's a good idea to save earlier rather than later, just to make sure that you don't accidentally lose your project should something happen to your laptop. To save your project, go to File, Save As, and it will automatically want you to save to the cloud. You can do this, but I do recommend you also save to your computer. So click on your computer and make sure that the location is one that you can find later. For this example, I will be saving it to my downloads. Make sure the project name is one that makes sense to you or it aligns with your project guidelines. Make sure the format is Photoshop so that you can come back to this and keep working on it until you're done. Hit save, you can hit OK, and now it will be saved to that folder. To reopen it, you just have to double click on the file name, or if you open Photoshop, it should appear as one of your most recent files. If you want to save as a PDF file, you can go to File, Save As, and then from here you can change it to Photoshop PDF. If you want to export as an image, then you would go to File, Export, Export As. And then from here, you'll be able to change the format to whatever your project calls for. You can choose between PNG, JPEG, or GIF. You can select the quality. And then usually for all of this, I just leave the default and hit Export. From here, it'll ask you to make sure the name is correct and the location is correct. So make sure you're choosing the correct folder and then hit Save. This will now be available for you to share and upload to Canvas or share with someone who doesn't have Photoshop.